Welcome to the Union League Club in New York City. I'm Jeff Bridgman, and I want to show you tonight an exhibition of 13 star flags specifically that we have going on right here, right now. 13 star flags are something that we've made throughout American history, from the very beginning to the present. And they could come in a host of different star configurations. And that's sort of the purpose of this exhibition, is to show you what the flag looked like in early America and what makes one example maybe more rare than another. So there was no official design for the flag until 1912. And that's when Howard Taft passed an executive order that laid that down for the first time, and the colors and the shades of red and blue, the number of points on the stars, etc. But in early America, anything went. So the most common way to configure the stars was in lineal rows. But there were various ways you could do that to arrive at a count of 13. And one of those that is, for some reason, exceedingly rare is the one behind me, where the stars are configured into a 5-3-5 lineal pattern. So we call this a 5-3-5. Imagine that. Has to be some kind of name, right? So we can tell them, from any other sort of example that we might see. And before we really get into that one, I want to bring you over here and show you a flag that was either made or certainly used, well, right down the street from here. This up in the corner is a flag that was made by, or at least contracted for, probably more likely, Macy's and Company. Macy's is about 6 blocks away from us right now. And, we're right next to Grand Central Station, right next to the Empire State Building. We're right here in the heart of it. And it's really fun to see the stamp that's on the hoist of this flag, because you rarely see that sort of marking on just about anything. I'd never seen a stamp from Macy's before, and I bought 2 of these great flags that were used, probably around 1905 or so, right here in New York City. So the stars are arranged in what we call a 3-2-3-2-3. Another really mysteriously named pattern. This was the most common design in early flags, and early 13-star flags specifically, and it didn't show up, however, until the Civil War, when the U.S. Navy switched from another pattern it was using and started to employ the 3-2-3-2-3 for its U.S. Navy small boat ensigns. Those were little flags flown off on a skiff, little boats that take sailors back and forth to shore, and sometimes off the yard arm of a larger vessel. After that point, starting in about 1864, this becomes far and away the most common pattern, and it is the most common among surviving 13-star flags of any kind. There are, however, about, say, 80 known patterns for the 13-star flag specifically. And I'm going to show you another one that's the next thing up the rarity scale. Right behind me is a flag in what we call a medallion pattern. This particular a medallion can apply to a whole group of star configurations, and does. But this particular one among 13-star flags is what you might call the medallion. This consists of a wreath of 8 stars with a star in the center, sometimes a big star, sometimes not. More often a little bit bigger than the others, and then a star in each corner flanking the central pattern. This pattern doesn't show up until the Civil War either, even though it seems like a pretty logical way to lay it out. And it's rare during the Civil War, except on some forms of printed parade flags, which are scarce things, but that's the most common place you'll see it in the Civil War period. But then at the time of the centennial, this design explodes, especially on printed flags, and becomes very popular too in the late 19th century when flag makers, commercial makers, start to make little flags for the first time, like that one behind me. There are many other lineal patterns, but only a couple that you see with any frequency, and this is the other one. This is the 454. The 454 was used by the U.S. Navy early on, 1840s and 50s, and until 1864 or so. And we know it to be a very early design. Unlike the other two I just showed you, this is a very early pattern, could even be the first of all patterns used. On the Stars and Stripes, we don't know, because no one knows what the first one looked like. There's no record of it. So in terms of row pattern flags and their survival, why just those two patterns do you see the most often? Why not this? I mean, this is a pretty logical way to lay them out in a 535, but for some reason, where there are literally hundreds and hundreds of 32323 pattern flags, there are almost no 535s. So across all surviving examples of early flags, there are just 7 in the 535 pattern. 5 of those are all effectively sort of the same. That is, some have hand-sewn stripes, some have treadle, but all are clearly from the same maker. One of those is documented in a book by Peter Keim and his son Kevin called A Grand Old Flag. I owned 2 of the other examples, and all 4 of those are in the same size. All of them share the same type of stars in that they can't in either one direction or the other. On this one versus actually all 4 others, they can't with one arm directed at 1 o'clock. The others all have an arm directed at 11 o'clock. But if you think about it, I mean, they line up on both sides. If you flip this, you get the pattern that's on the others. So what happened? This is exactly what happened in a lot of flag making, is that it probably really didn't matter. So the canton might have been this way or the other way. They sewed it ahead of time and joined it to the stripes. Didn't really matter how they did that. So there was maybe no prescribed way by the flag maker or the woman that made it, probably in a cottage industry setting. And there may have been multiple people working at the same time. Maybe there's only one sewing machine, or maybe one woman just preferred to hand sew them because by the time she messed around with that machines all have problems. They're problematic things if you've ever owned one, even if you know what you're doing. So who knows? But they're all produced right in the same time. They all date to the Civil War period. The other 2 that I owned each have a little bit of something to contribute. One of them actually had a stamp along the hoist binding, that was shield-shaped and contained inside it either the maker's information or maybe the seller's information. Sometimes you'll see a mark like that from a general store. Probably it was the maker, but unfortunately, even though I'm seriously good at figuring out markings on flags just from having done it so much, you can give me something and you'd never know what in the world it says on it, and I can tell you what it says. I'm very used to looking at markings, and I kind of know what words I'm looking for, and because of that I can put it together. But I've tried several times and very hard to figure out what this says. God, I wish I could tell, because then we'd know exactly where they came from. I have a sneaky suspicion that they were made in Ohio. I'm not going to get into the details of that right now. Some of it's a hunch, some of it is based on fact of where they came out of, but let's just say I don't really know, we don't really know where they came from. The other flag that I owned in this type had specific history to a Civil War officer from Staten Island, so right here nearby. I think that these were all U.S. Army flags of some function. They are not regimental battle flags, at least not by military standards. They're actually much smaller. U.S. Army battle flags were 6 by 6.5 feet. They were huge, much bigger than this flag. Although this flag could have been hand carried, and it may have also served another capacity, because the U.S. Army had its own boats. The U.S. Navy flew 13-star flags on boats. The Army is thought to have mirrored that practice. And when it couldn't get flags from the Navy, maybe, they worked very closely together at that time. And maybe they went out and procured their own flags. So that was an Army officer in Staten Island. And so in addition to that, there's another of these that's in private hands that is said to have been gifted by General Grant to a member of the family who was a Civil War soldier. So there's another U.S. Army connection. It's just, I haven't researched that particular one. I only know of it, and I've seen pictures. It's definitely the same maker, no doubt. Sometimes stories get turned around. So the story on this particular one that came with it was that it was made in Philadelphia during the Revolutionary War. Well, this one has treadle sewn stripes. There were no treadle machines during the Revolutionary War. I knew that not to be true. It was handed down that way. It's a verbal history, and I'm sure it just got a little bit embellished, probably not really on purpose or misunderstood along the way. It's one of those things, family history, any antiques dealer will tell you. Sometimes it's passed along with the absolute best intentions, but just like a lunch line going from one guy to the next, if you've watched, the joke is, that it starts at one end as one story, and by the time it gets to the other end, it's a completely different story, and facts get jumbled along the way. That's probably what happened here. I mean, many museums that had early 13-star flags just, thought they dated to the Revolutionary War. It was just, when else could they date to? There weren't a lot of people at museums that understood flags. So that's just the way it went until the 1970s and sometimes still today. That's 4 flags. I've owned 3, one of them's behind me, Peter Kime, and there's another one. Where is it? Right here at the Union League Club above the bar. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that it just happens to be right here at the club. Also thought to have been Rev War for a long time, handed down through a family. I knew the owner. I used to talk to him here during my exhibitions. Unfortunately, he's since passed. He gifted it to the club because it'd been there forever, and now at least we know the right story. Tremendous flag, just like this one, except it has a unique factor about it in that it is smaller. It's the only quote unquote little one among the group, and this is much smaller than most flags of the time, but that is the smallest one of this group. Definitely the same maker, same type of stars, Canada at 11 o'clock. It's the same effective thing. So amazing that it's right here of all possible places, another Civil War flag. The last two are very different from this one, and both, I owned one of them, both Civil War period examples as I recall. So these are extraordinarily rare things, only 7 surviving. There are a couple of other known lineal designs. There's a 4342, I owned that. There was a 544 that I was lucky enough to own, came out of the Masti collection. There's another 544, except they're arranged in columns, which I also acquired. And there's the rarest among them really is 2 rows of 6 with 1 outside it. Off the charts. Oh my God, what a great flag that I luckily was recently able to acquire. Those exist as just one example. There isn't another in any of those cases. So that's what makes this so extraordinary. Just 7 known examples. Why? We don't know. But thanks for coming here to look at it with me today at the Union League Club. And I hope you enjoy it. If you've enjoyed the program, and that you come back to join me again soon. Thanks for looking.